Am I good? Can I say that again? Good morning. I need to see some smiling faces. Or no, I don't know if that's cheesing. That's cheesing, Preston. That's not smiling. That's like cheesing. So it's good to have you here. My name is Dorsey Atkinson. I'm the pastor here at Life Spring Church. And are you excited to be here? Yeah. Are you glad it's a little bit chillier, a little bit colder? Is anybody liking that? You know, I started out this morning with a sweater, and now I switched from a sweater to a shirt, and now I'm rolling up my sleeves. So this is Georgia weather. You know, you have to dress in layers and take it off just like you're on the Appalachian Trail or something. Hey, this is an exciting day for me. Do you know why? Let me tell you why it's exciting. Let me tell you why it's exciting. Because I finished one of the greatest events that I've ever done. I have completed 7 weddings in 7 weeks, and yesterday was the last one, and this Sunday I don't have another wedding to do. 7 weddings in 7 weeks. That's just remarkable for me, because most pastors don't even get to do 2 or 3 a year. I think I've done like 13, I don't know how many I've done this year, but it's been a lot this year. But 7 in 7 weeks is a stretch I've never done before. That means, you understand, 7 weddings in 7 weeks, just that period of time, is 15% of my weekends we're doing weddings. You understand what I'm saying? And there's people in here that's been married, and I'm not complaining about any of them, but let me tell you, I dream the vows in my head every night. I'm to love, to honor, to cherish. I've got this stuff in my head. I've always scripted out the weddings and because I don't want to get emotional, or if I do get emotional, I can still do them. But I have been doing this wedding thing, and I'm happy to have a weekend off. There you go. So I'm just being honest, and then we'll start back up. Now, anybody else wants to go through marriage, we can get premarital counseling. We can get working on that now. So you nominating yourself? Okay, I got you covered, man. So anyway, one of the verses, one of the chapters, or one of the scriptures that we use, one of the things that I do in a wedding service is that, you do the greeting, the welcome, and has anybody been to a wedding this year? Hold your hand up if you've been to a wedding this year, okay? So in some form or has anybody in here been to a wedding in the last 2 or 3 years? I was going to say, I'm trying to think how long, because it's been long enough. Okay, so so in the wedding, there's this part where, what I call, they load up, right? They load up. The girls' team loads up on that side, and the boy teams load up on this side. They just get in there, because you can't get married if they all load up. Then they come down, and then there's, the boys' team has got the captain of the team, which is beside the groom, so that's the best man, and then there's the captain of the girls' team, and she's sort of standing there, and then they come walking down the aisle like Joel is right there. And actually, Joel, you're getting married in 2 weeks or 3 weeks?
3.
You better know. It's 3 weeks. See, now I said I'm not performing any more weddings, but I get to go to one more wedding. I have one more wedding to go to, but I'm not performing that one. So Joel, we're talking about your wedding. We're talking about how this is going to happen. The girls' teams are going to be over here. The boys' teams are going to be over here. They're going to come down the aisle, and you're going to see Nikki back there, and you're going to be all good. She's going to come in, escorted down by her dad, and then he's going to transition into being a pastor probably, and then you'll exchange the bride right here, and you do all this stuff, and then you walk up here, and then they'll do some other things. But in most of them, there'll be some scriptures read. In most weddings, there's a scripture read, or some scriptures, and you let the couple choose their scriptures. But many couples choose one from 1 Corinthians. Does anybody know the number? 13. It's called the love chapter. Now, the reason it's called the love chapter is because that's basically what it's talking about, is love. And something that you want to talk about to these people getting married, right? And so the premise is I'm talking to them about what love is and what it's not. But really, I'm talking to everybody about what it is and what it's not. So this morning I wanted to start out by reading to you chapter 13 of Paul writing to a group of people in a town called Corinth. And so it's called 1 Corinthians. It's the first letter that he wrote. And so he writes this letter to this group of people who were religious people, who were church people, who were people he had formed a church with in this town called Corinth. And that church there might have had multiple campuses in that area. And so Paul would write a letter to one of them, and they would take and pass the letter around to others. It was, Email, you can hit distribution and you can copy a bunch of people one email. They couldn't do that back in that day. They had to go just take the letter, read it out, and then somebody toted it down to another place and read it there, and so forth and so on. And so Paul, in the 13th chapter, or I don't think you write letters with chapters. That's pretty long-winded, but they divided up in chapters, so it'd be better for us to understand. He writes these words. Listen to what it says. He says, "If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but I have not love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal." Now, I'm just going to just talk to you about this just a second. So what he's saying is, if I can speak the best language, if I've got the golden tongue of Andy Stanley to preach, or Joel Osteen, if I have these great vocal abilities, and I can do these great things of talking to people about things, and I can just talk or sing like angels, but I don't have love, it's like my grandchildren in the kitchen playing with the pots and pans and spoons and making noise like that. Do you get that? Can you get that in your head? You know what? Grandchildren play with that stuff. They beat the pans and all. He says, that's what it sounds like. It doesn't matter how much you talk about church. It doesn't matter how much you talk about this. It doesn't matter how much you talk about great things of God and all that. If you don't have love behind it, you sound like a bunch of grandkids back there clanging on the stuff, making noise. That's what it sounds like to everybody else. Now, to those grandchildren, they think they're making beautiful noise or beautiful music. But to everyone else listening, it just sounds like a bunch of mess. And Paul's sort of talking to people saying this. He's like, you understand what your words without love, just a bunch of noise. Then he goes on to say, he says, if you can fathom, or if you have the gift of prophecy and you can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and you have faith to move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. So he's like, listen, even if you're a rocket scientist, if you can solve all the problems, all the mathematical problems, even if you just, this business whiz, this whatever, if you're Mark Cuban and you can on Shark Tank and you're Mr. Wonderful or something like that, and you can have this knowledge and ability to do this, and you have this ability to where you can fathom all the mysteries, and you even have faith to invest in the right things and be able to do, I can foresee, I can anticipate what's going to happen, and you don't have love, he said, you are nothing. He's talking to church people. He's talking to people who come to church and who celebrate the things that we celebrate in church. And he's like, listen, you can have all the faith you want. And you can talk all about what God's going to do in the future. And you can understand the Scriptures and be the best Bible study teacher there is and best person to teach the Scriptures. And if you don't have love, you are nothing. And then he says, if I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but I do not have love, I gain nothing. So he's like, you can put all your money in your wallet in the offering plate. You can sacrifice your time and volunteer and serve. You can come up here like Luke or Dalton or Jose or Marcus or the others that come up. You come up like the musicians, and you can do all of this stuff. And if you don't have love, if you're not doing it with love or you don't have love, you gain nothing. Now, if you're church people, how's that sounding to you so far? It sounds like people in the church today to me. It sounds like that I hear people say, oh, I'm burned out, I'm tired, I've been doing these things, and why do I keep doing this for somebody else and they don't ever step up and they don't do anything? Why am I serving my time and giving my time, energy, talents, and gifts to serve others, and they aren't doing anything? It's about time they stepped up. When are they going to step up? And we get frustrated and we get burned out. Anybody ever felt like that before? Anybody ever been involved in something where you're more concerned about what everybody else is doing because you know you're working hard, you know you're doing these things, you know you're doing these certain things, whatever it is, and they just won't do it? And it's frustrating. Paul goes on to say, let me tell you something about love. He says, love is patient. Love is kind. Does anybody know this? Y'all read this with me. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. And it is not proud. So you can see me telling a couple getting married why this is important. Nobody else needs to know this. Just the married people. They're making a commitment, a covenant with one another. They're making a promise to love each other until death do us part. They're making these promises, so they need to know what's behind their promises. You can't just say these words and not have this love behind it. You got to understand that when you have this love, it's going to display itself with patience, with kindness. You won't envy what the other one's doing. You're not going to boast about what you've done. And you're not going to be proud, which opposite of proud means you're going to be humble. What's the next verse? It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It's not all about me. It is not easily angered. That means if they leave the toilet bowl seat up, you don't get ticked off women. You just get over it. You understand? It happens, I'm telling you. And guys, if they use all the toilet paper and there's none left, you don't get upset. You just get over it. I don't know how you get over it, but you just get over it. It doesn't keep records of wrong. And then you don't throw it back up in their face in several weeks about what they did back then. Does anybody understand what I'm talking about? That's just for married couples, because average people don't need to know that, right? Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Next. It always protects. Read this with me. It always protects. It always trusts. It always hopes. It always perseveres. In other words, love never fails. Love never fails. And then in verse 13, he closes this passage out by saying this. Do we have that one? And now these three things remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. There's always going to be faith. There's always going to be hope. And there's always going to be love. But the greatest of these three, if you got to have one, if you got to have one that you're leaning on, I want you to have all three, but you need to lean on this. The greatest of these is love. And that's just for people who are getting married. It has nothing to do with the rest of the world. Or maybe Paul heard some of the stories that Jesus told. Maybe Paul, who was a scholar, who had a lot of knowledge, who had enough information. You remember, Paul may have been talking about himself in this story. Because you see, Paul knew everything there was about the Scriptures. Paul was a Pharisee, you see. He understood the Scriptures, had them memorized. The whole, what you would call the Old Testament, he's got memorized. He can just find the page number. He can quote you what is actually being said. This is who Paul is that's writing this. He has a knowledge. He had a belief that when he was in that religious order of the Pharisees, that when Jesus came, that Jesus was going to be the downfall of the church, and therefore he persecuted the church, put pressure on them, and actually carried Christians off to be killed. And this is the Paul that's writing this, who met Jesus one time. After Jesus was resurrected, he met Jesus on the road, and he went blind. And Jesus said something along the lines of, Paul. It was actually, his name was Saul at that time. Jesus changed his name. He says, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Instead, what Jesus was saying to Saul, listen, all this stuff you're doing to people who follow me is like doing it to me. When you hurt them, you're hurting me. When you're easily angered at them, you're easily angered at me. When you are prideful about this is about me. And so Paul writes this. And we use it not for churches. We use it for a couple getting married. I don't think Paul ever had in his mind that was going to be read at so many weddings throughout the generations that would follow him. But what he did hope and pray was it be read to a church like us. A group of people pulled together to form a body that they would call a church or a church family. And see, I think when he started putting these things together with what he learned about Jesus, he began to understand some things. Now, over the last several weeks, we've been talking about Luke chapter 15. And in Luke chapter 15, it is, if 1 Corinthians 13 is the love chapter, because almost everything, all the verses are reflecting or focusing on love, then Luke chapter 15 is the lost and found section. Because every story, every parable in that chapter, in that little section of Luke, is about things being lost and things being found, and the celebration that occurs with those things that are found. But I think it's more than about being lost. I think Luke chapter 15 is the love chapter. And let me show you why. Over the last several weeks, we've talked about things, and if you've been here or joined us online, then you understand that we've talked about in the last several weeks that the first part of Luke 15 talks about a lost sheep. 100 sheep, one's lost. The shepherd goes, finds the one, leaves the 99, searches till he finds it, brings it home, and there is a party and celebration. There's another story in there about a woman who loses her coin, one of her 10 coins from her dowry. The reason I hold my hand up here, we imagined that it was like a headband that had 10 coins on it that was part of her family's dowry for her to get married one day, and she loses a coin, which means it devalues that, and so she searches carefully until she finds it. When she finds it and reattaches it, she's celebrating personally, but she goes out and they celebrate as a family or as a community because that's exciting news. So there's a party. Then Jesus tells a story about 2 sons and a father. And the story goes something like this, that the 2 sons were working for the father, lived with the father on his farm, on his estate. And there was the older son and the younger son. And the younger son tells his father one day, he said, "Dad, listen, I want my part of the inheritance." "You do, son?" Yeah, I do. I think I'd like to have my part of the inheritance. "Well, you know, son, we've been taking care of this together as a family, you know, and all that, but I understand that's your part, and because you've asked for it, I'm going to love you and honor you, and I'm going to give it to you." "Well, thanks, Dad." Now, the younger son's the one that asked. Now, in Jewish culture, if you were the oldest son, you got a double portion, just because you were born first. Just one of the things, the way they do. So the oldest son would get a double portion, and the younger son would get whatever it is. So let's just say that there's, for an example, there's 5 brothers. Okay, let's just say there's 5 brothers. I'm making this up, okay? 5 brothers. If the oldest one gets a double portion, that must mean there's really 6 portions, right? So the oldest one gets a double, and then each one will get, does everybody understand that? Let's change it to a 4. There's 4 brothers, okay? The oldest brother would get a double portion, right? Which means 20, 40, 60, 80, nope. Well, let's change it to 3. Maybe that made it. I'm not the one that's got the knowledge in this verse. Right? There's 3 brothers, okay? The oldest gets a double portion. He gets 50%. Now I got something I can work with, yeah. Then the other brother would get 25, and the other brother would get, one gets a double. In this case, there's 2 brothers. There's 2 brothers. So if you divide this up, the oldest brother would get 66.67%, and the younger brother would get. So the dad does it. Takes all his accounts, takes his money, takes his stuff, and puts 33% in an account for the younger son. Everything's good. They go back to work. I'm sure the brother and his older brother talked about, "Man, what you doing, man? You asked Daddy for the money? Why are you doing that? He's not even dead. You're cold-hearted, man. I can't believe you would do that." I mean, I can hear the older brother, because you know how older brothers are. We look after younger. Don't older brothers look after younger? Does older siblings supposed to look after younger siblings? Supposed to. I mean, it's one of those things. It's like, you you always see these stories where when the daddy leaves and he looks at the son and he's like, "I know you're only 8 years old, but you have to take care of your other 3 siblings." And then they go and it makes good for scholarships when you sign up. "I'm the oldest and I had to take care of my younger kids and I need a scholarship to go to college." It works. I'm telling you. So, anyway, so what was I talking about? Huh? Oh, so they had a conversation, right? They had to have a conversation because the scripture says he stayed there for a while. But after a while, he decided to leave. The younger brother did. And if he's going to leave, guess what he's taking with him? His stuff. So he takes the 33% of his father's estate, which is his. Now, who's the other 66? It's actually the father's. But when the father passes away, who will it be? The older brothers. Okay, so he leaves. He goes out here. And you know how it is. You got a pocket full of money. It's just burning a hole in your pocket. It's just burning a hole in there. So he gets out there and he's spending on whatever. He goes to the bars and he's sitting there going, round for everybody. I got the next one. I'll pick up everybody. And everybody goes, whew, we like this guy. 2 or 3 days of this, man, they're drinking, they're partying, they're having a good time. He's just buying drinks for everybody, and everybody is this guy's friend. He actually gets out there, plays some poker game. Hey, man, they'll invite you into poker games and all because you got money, man. Come on, keep coming. He's not a good poker player, but they tell him he's a good poker player, And he just keeps losing. Then he gets a little bit lonely, and he's sort of wanting some affection. And he just doesn't want to go through the process of dating and all that stuff. So he just goes and pays a couple women and gets some prostitutes and go ahead and have his fun and all that. Because he's always trying to he's just trying to be his own man. And he just, Daddy did it the hard way. Daddy did it the long way. It took a long time for my father to do this, but I just want to take the shortcuts. And he keeps taking these shortcuts, and before long, he's burned through all of his money. And all of his shortcuts of not doing the things that his father had taught him on all those years led him to where he has nothing. And guess what happened to all his friends at the bar? They ain't loaning him any money. Won't give him a cigarette. The women, they ain't coming around him because they weren't coming around for anything but the money. So now he's alone, destitute, no money. He's like, I might have to find a job. And so he goes out and he can't find a job. A famine hits the area. Nobody's eating. He's there and he goes to work for a pig farmer. And I'm not sure if that's the only thing the guy did, but he just has pigs. And so he's starving and he's going, sir, I'd like to have a job. He said, fine. There's 10 buckets of this stuff down here that we feed the pigs. There's these little pods that we picked off. You take that down there to that field and you feed them, water them, take care of my hogs and, make sure they're all taken care of, make sure they're okay. Yes, sir, but could I have a couple of those to eat? What kind of place you think this is, boy? You're not eating my pig's food. You do your work the rest of the day, and you get that food down there, and you take care of my pigs. At the end of the day, I'll pay you. Then you can do what you want to with your money, but don't you take none of my stuff that I'm feeding my pigs. You aren't even good enough to have that. And off he goes, carrying these buckets full of stuff and slop and whatever else, and feeds the pigs. And he's sitting there one day, and he's feeding the pigs. And the Scripture says that he comes to his senses. And he says, he talks to self. He says, self, my Father's servants, on the worst day that we've ever had on my Father's farm, have never gone without food. There's always plenty. And here my stomach is growling, and I'm hungry. I haven't eaten for 3 days, and he won't even let me eat the food for the pigs. He won't even let me eat the pig slop to eat. What have I done? I've lost everything. I've lost everything. And so, I think I'm going to go back home. I think I'm going to tell my father, I think I'll tell my father, Dad, I've sinned against you and against heaven. I know I've messed up against you because you're my father, but I sinned against God because I've done some really bad things when I left you. I didn't just leave your teaching. I sort of walked away from God. And I left him, and I've been out here on my own, and I don't even deserve to be called your son anymore. But that's not what it is, Father. I don't want to be your son. I'm okay with that. I miss it. I just want to be in your presence. I just want to be your servant. Can I come to work for you? And because he knew his father, because he knew the type of man his father was, because you got to understand, you got to know your father to do that. Because if you know your father is going to rub it in your nose, rub your face in it because you messed up and going to say, I told you so. I told you should have never left me. If you'd have done what I said and do it like I said, you wouldn't be in this mess. Now, there's some fathers of people in this room, there's some fathers in this room, that's the way we behave to our children. I told you so, and blah, blah, blah. And those children know it. And it makes for a long time before they come to their senses, because their senses tell them, my father's a jerk and doesn't care about me. And they never come home. But in this case, the guy's reasoning, he's like, I know my dad. He might not take me back as a son. I'm okay with that, but he's not going to I'll be a servant. So he heads back. He comes back, and his father It's a long way, so he's walking a long way. He's got a long, good time to rehearse his speech. And his father looks at him off at a distance and goes, "That's my son, I believe." And he goes, and he heads out. He runs out to meet the son. I mean, doesn't wait till he gets out. He runs out there and meets him right there. There he is, and right there. "Son!" And he drops to his knees. "Father," and he practiced this speech. "Father, I've sinned against you and against heaven, and I don't even deserve to be your son. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Father, I just want to come back. Can I be one of your servants? I'll just take care of the horses. Father, whatever, anything you ask, I'll do. I just want to be back here. Because I know you care about those that are in your household." And his father gets him up. "Son, get up from there, get up from there." And his servant who run with him, because his servant's gone with him, "You get the robe and you put on that boy as quick as you can. You get to the house, get the robe, get that robe, but put it on him. Because I want him to be covered up. I don't want nobody else to see this mess. This is my son." And he said, "You take that ring that I've got in my upper desk drawer up there, and you take that ring out that's a symbol of our family crest, and you put it on his finger. And as a matter of fact, you get in there and get some shoes up here and put them on this boy's feet real quick. He needs some sandals because we aren't home yet. We got to get him home. And by the way, when all that's done, you get that fatted calf we've been saving for a big celebration, and you slaughter it, butcher it, get it ready, because we fix to have a party. Because my son, who was dead is alive. My son who was lost is found. And we're going to celebrate." And he walks with his son back, and the servant goes and gets this stuff and puts the stuff on him and gets back and all this. And this is where we are today. But see, there's that older brother. There's that older brother that stayed at home. You know, he's the church person that never left the church, has been in the church all his life. "I was born, baptized in church. I'm never going to leave the church." He was always in church, always doing the stuff that you should do as a good church person. He was singing in the choir. He was singing on the stage. He was going on mission trips and doing all of these things. He was a great church person, a great son of the Father. Great example. And listen what happens. Meanwhile, the older son was out in the field. And when he came near the house, he heard the music and the dancing. So he never saw his brother. He never saw anything. He just hears it. He just hears singing, hears dancing, or sees dancing. So he calls one of the servants and he asks what's going on. "Your brother," what does he say? Tell me that word. "Your brother," say that with me. "Your brother," wait a minute, you say it together in unison. Y'all sound, let's say it together on three. 1, 2, 3. "Your brother has come home." He replied, "Your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound." The servant, who's just a servant, says, "It's your brother has come home, and your father has killed the fatted calf because your brother is" what? He's come home how? Safe and sound. Yeah, he might be scarred up. Yeah, he might smell like a pig. Yeah, he's got these new shoes that he's putting on those old feet. Yeah, he's got... But your brother, your father has killed the fatted calf, is home safe and sound. Now, any brother who cared about his sibling, you would think would be happy, wouldn't you? Any brother. A brother who has the knowledge to understand what his father wants. The brother who has the faith to believe in his father and not leave his father's side and stay and work for him for all this time. The brother who could speak so nicely and say, "I'll do whatever you want, Father. I can do this. If I have the gift of tongues of men and of angels and have not love, I'm like a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have the faith that can move mountains and I don't have love, I'm nothing." Love is patient. Love is kind. Love doesn't envy. It's not easily angered. You remember those things that we said earlier? So which one are we going to get to see the brother display? The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So the father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you, and I never disobeyed your orders. Yet you have never even given me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, come home, you kill the fatted calf. You hear this argument going on? Can you feel the older brother's pain? I've done the right things. I've slaved for you. I've obeyed every order. And you won't even give me this. It's almost like he's not doing this because he loves the Father. He's doing it because he's looking for something in return. I'm beginning to wonder how much this older son really loves the Father. His Father. I'm just telling you guys, this is the way my mind rolls. The Father's here at home. One son's out in the field. One son's in God knows where. This one comes home every day and goes out, comes home and goes out, goes on. This one's been gone a long, long time. He comes and cresses the hill. He goes to him, has this conversation. Come on back, son. He celebrates, and now this son won't come in. And so what does he do? Let's have a conversation. Don't want to talk to you, Dad. Look at what you've done. Pushes him away, right? Right? And now what did you do? Do you sense that? Come on, son. Come on in the house. I've seen him just putting his arm around. Come on, son. Come on in. You got to understand this. And he's like, no, I don't want any of you. I don't want any part of this. And he goes off on his, you understand what I'm saying? Remember when we was talking about lost sheep a couple of weeks ago? And we said that the good shepherd would go after the sheep and he wouldn't stop until he found it. And when he finds it, he picks it up and puts it on his shoulders, right? What if the sheep doesn't want to be found? You ever think about that? If the sheep sees him coming, he's going to go the opposite way. I don't want to be around you. I'm trying to get away from you. But when the sheep submits, he lets him pick him up and he brings him back. I think that one was lost and this one's lost of the brothers. And this one doesn't want to be picked up. He's angry. What did we say at the beginning? We said, love is patient. Love is kind. Does not envy, does not boast, and is not proud. It does not dishonor others. This son has been dishonoring his father the whole time because he hasn't been doing anything but going through the motions. Because love isn't behind what he's doing. The 66% of that estate or that kingdom is what he's after. And where's the church at today in this? Is that us as a church? The father comes up and he says this. He says, but the father said, wait a minute, wrong page. He said, no, it's not wrong page, it's the right thing. Remember, do you have slide 4? I don't know what slide it is. Like Luke 15, 31, 32? Okay. Read verse 32, you guys. Flip it to 32. Everybody read this out loud. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and found. You get me saying this? We had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of who? Tell me how he identified it to the boy. To the older son, what did he say to him? This brother of yours, right? Was dead and alive, was lost and found. Go back to what he said to this son. My son, the father said, you are, nope, not that one. It's 15:22. 15:22. Do you have that one? If you don't, then I'm going to show it to you real quick. This is what he said to the younger son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe to put this on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf on that. Right here. 24. For, what's that say?
Sons of mine.
Was dead. Is that not the same thing as the other one? Except for a couple of words. This son of mine was dead and is alive. Was lost and found. This brother of yours was dead but is alive. Lost and found. Do you catching what I'm saying? He told this brother, everything I have is yours. Including your brother. Including your brother. See, church, what's happening today is that the body of Christ, there's a struggle in the church where we stay in the church and we go through the motions and we do all these things and we don't have love. And so when we see these people out there, we see them as those people rather than our brothers and sisters that are struggling with addiction, that are struggling with these things, that are struggling with all this life. They're struggling. And we see that as their fault because they took what God had given them, the free will choice. They took this gift and they squandered it to do that. And we sit there and point fingers at them and make it so hard for them to come back home. And when they do come home, we don't want to celebrate because we see them as your son, not my brother and not my sister. Because we don't know how to love. Jesus was asked, what is the greatest, most important part of the Scriptures? What's the most important part of the law? And Jesus said, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. Love your brother as yourself. Remember in that story when he was asked that, love your neighbor, who's my neighbor? And he tells the Good Samaritan story. It's like, who is my neighbor? It's not who's my neighbor, who's my brother and who's my sister. See, if we all have the same Father, aren't we all brothers and sisters? Then why are we judging our brothers and sisters rather than loving them? Why are we not celebrating when they come back home? Why are we not excited when they come back home? Why are we not? Why? Because we're not patient, we're not kind, we envy them, it keeps no records of wrong. Oh my gosh, this brother knew every prostitute he slept with. He knew everything that the other brother knew everything about him and did nothing to help him. Because that's not my brother. That's my father's other son. I'm not responsible for him. See, I think it's time for us to start feeling the shoes of what God's called us to be. And that's to start loving others as we love ourselves. That's start to treat people who are outside the walls of the church, who are outside the body of Christ, who are outside as our brother and sister and love them. And if they take one step back, I'm telling you, if they take one step back, we celebrate. If they take 2 steps back, we celebrate. We're going to eat fatted calf every day. If it takes it for them to come back, we want to celebrate. Because those that were dead are alive. Those that were lost are found. It's closing this out. Do you know what I found in my life? Who makes the best seekers? Are the ones who were the lost the longest. The best rescue workers are the ones that somebody else done something for them. You ever notice that? Most of the time, it's the people who receive something that somebody else did. I've seen so many stories. I don't know if it's just a coincidence. It's like, this such and such done this for me, and I decided to go into this branch of the military. Or this such and such done this to me, and that made me. The best people who love others that are not like them are the ones who have received love when they weren't like everybody else. The ones who love the best, the ones who love the deepest, the ones who love the most richly, others are the ones who have received that love themselves and haven't forgotten. So that's where I want to leave you at today. I want to leave you with that thought about how we're to go out and plant this love, how we're to go out to water and nurture this love out in the world, just like it's a seed. At some form or some stage of a seed, either in the dirt or in the process of growing, we're to love it and nurture it all the time. Not just go through the motions, not just talk it, but to actually do the love. And so in order to do that, I want to remind us is we're going to recite the Sower's Creed. It's found in your bulletin. It'll be on the screen, I think. And I'm going to ask that you please stand as this is being our closing. And we're going to pray this together aloud.